Hi, Pavel. How are you?
Very well, thanks, Lorenzo.
Thank you for participating in this conversation about your exhibition in no-profit space in Florence, the name Base Progetti per l'arte. Thank you very much for your time. And so I want to start with the very simple question. Your exhibition, they have the title Level, and they have the relationship with the Galileo Galilei. Why? What
Well,
is about?
what it's about, there is a sort of an echo between the words base and level. You know, I usually, or always really in my work, start with something that is already around. I don't really think of it as kind of site-specific practice. It's not site-specific, but it's a kind of situation-specific, maybe. And so, since I didn't have the chance to come and see the space and so on, I kind of started what I had, which was the word base. And somehow it rhymes for me with the word level. It's somehow kind of connected in the head, not straight away, of course. And the Galileo reference entered into it as another kind of found thing, if you like. You know, other than that, I really didn't have much. In fact, this was maybe the first time in a very long time that the objects that were used in the exhibition, a couple of buckets, some lamps, were sourced especially for it, and the clocks. And as you know, in my first proposal, I had suggested slightly a different arrangement of things, using only objects that you would source for me. But the work didn't really get kind of going until some existing things from my own environment entered into it, like the two pictures from a magazine. One was a circus equilibrist, and one was a strange sort of monument to space exploration from the old East Germany. And then kind of things just somehow fell into place. Another reason for that title, or what made that title stick for me, was the strange kind of arrangement of the two rooms in base. They are sort of symmetrical and very asymmetrical at the same time. You know, there is this very tall step between the two of them. And that somehow kind of suggested what I should do with it. You know, somehow suggesting a kind of a level physically. In the bucket in the lower room, there was water, and so there was water also in the bucket in the top room. And the level of that water was the same, like a spirit level. And it all just somehow kind of then, found its place and fell in place. And that really is all that there is to it. But not as a title, perhaps, but the kind of idea of a level, of leveling, that was really what triggered my thinking.
This is very interesting. And in this idea, you thinking about Galileo Galilei?
I'm not quite thinking, well, yes and no. I have done a couple of other pieces using references to Galileo Galilei. And a year and a half before I did the thing in base, I did something in Pisa in the, what is it called? The Museo della Grafica, I think it's called, which was a piece of work, existing piece of work to do with Galileo's dialogue about the world's two chief systems, his famous book. It's a completely different sort of thing. But somehow, it just sort of seemed. It just seemed that perhaps visitors of base, people in Florence, would be somehow already equipped to get the kind of references to Galileo. That I was sort of trying to attune to something kind of that is part of the local knowledge and part of the history of the place, and somehow sort of present in that part of Italy.
Mm-hmm. And this is very important. You showing in the library the book of Galileo Galilei. This is very interesting, no?
Yeah, well, that was another starting point. When I say I usually work with what I find around, rather than sourcing materials, and never really start with a blank sheet of paper, as it were, or kind of, metaphorically speaking, blank canvas. That was another kind of trigger point. The fact that in that in base, in that small space, you have a reference library. You have a kind of collection of books about art or design that people are free to use, and so on. So, that was another kind of trigger point, adding to that kind of selection of information or knowledge, sort of, another thing which somehow really, in some kind of way, the idea of the dialogue, which was quite frequently used kind of format of philosophical writing in the 17th century, somehow that idea of a dialogue for me again kind of enriches the idea of having a kind of reference library around.
It's a very, very important. I want to ask the other question about the time. The time is very important, no? In this show, you propose 2 o'clock in the 2 different rooms.
Yeah, there were 2 wall clocks which were set sort of slightly differently, 2 minutes apart. The first one, as you entered, was 1 minute fast, and the other, this one in the second room, was 1 minute late. So you were never kind of in the place, as it were, at the right time. You arrived a minute late, and by the time you moved into the second room, you were sort of looking at the right time, except that the right time was no longer right, and that sort of somehow that space between the 2 of them perhaps sort of suggests sort of something about the sort of autonomy of the aesthetic experience. I do believe that the aesthetic experience is somehow kind of autonomous from the perception of the kind of passage of time and the physical realities of the world.
Great. I have a very tricky question now. When they look at your show in Base or the other your show, the people they look at the object, the normal object, and maybe for the first reaction is the relationship with your practice with the practice of Marcel Duchamp, the ready-made practice. But the answer is not that simple, maybe, or yes.
No, it's not that simple. I mean, I don't actually myself use the expression ready-made. That's something that belongs sort of to the the world of Duchamp and to that kind of radical thinking of that time. For me, it's more like, artists work with what they have around. Whether the things that they have around, or whether they are things or phenomena or ideas or whatever, you work with sort of things that you have around. And what interests me in general is how little it takes sometimes to bring your attention to something that you already pass unnoticed in your daily life, something that is kind of worn thin by familiarity and to perhaps suggest that these ordinary things, these kind of old worn things, are actually amazing. They are not amazing in themselves, but they can kind of create sort of amazing situations, perhaps, or confrontations.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And maybe I have the other question in a relationship about this your idea. What is it? What is your position about the American conceptual art? Difference and the proximity?
About American conceptual art?
Yeah.
Well, I would know.
The difference is so much, but maybe. Sorry.
I've never tried to articulate any position on it, so I won't improvise right now. I don't know if I have a position. I am kind of, it is a kind of work. If by American conceptual art you mean that kind of Soul-Levitt, Joseph Kossuth kind of thing, the second half of the 1960s, yes, I mean, I enjoy it very much, and it is a source of inspiration up to a point, but it is not really something that, for me, that kind of, gives me. It does give me actually a different kind of pleasure or different kind of experience than perhaps some other forms of art. But I don't like categorizing art like that. I get we went together, Lorenzo, to see the Donatello exhibition, and I got a huge kind of kick out of that. It's art is art, and everything else is everything else.
Yeah, wow. Yes, it's true, because you're working about the experience in the world, not in the museum.
That's right. I mean, for me, art is about the world, but not necessarily about the world in the way which now seems to be dominant, that it kind of comments on concrete situations or on concrete kind of social and political and economic circumstances and so on, or that it is a sort of about the world in the sense that it's biographical, for instance, and so on. That's not something that interests me, but it is about the world because it cannot really be about anything else. What else could art be about?
But a very strong position. Thank you. And I want to ask the question about the other your practice that you have in for a long time. You a teacher. You're teaching for a long time, and I'm very curious that you're speaking about the two different practices, artist and teaching. Is possible exist the relationship?
Yes, I mean, I have never seen them as separate, really. It's there is a very big question today in art education, and that is, how do you teach something that has no clear parameters? Because art no longer really has any clear parameters. You can still, and you should teach, some practical kind of teaching should have some practical dimension. You can still teach how to do something, which is a different thing from just teaching something. But somehow, sort of in general, we no longer really know what it is that we are really trying to do when we are teaching. And so, one just tries to share maybe with the students both ways, some kind of loose, vague sort of ideas and thoughts, so that perhaps in a sort of longer time span, something may sort of come out of those discussions and may gel. It's about maybe it's about maintaining faith in what we do.
And do you enjoy teaching?
I always enjoy teaching. Yes, I don't miss the institution anymore. Now sort of I left teaching 6-7 years ago, and I don't miss the institutions, but I have always enjoyed teaching. There was always kind of, it's something, it keeps you sharp, and it keeps you sort of on your toes, because there is a great responsibility which comes with teaching. It's not
it's true.
that job, because you are, really gambling here or playing with sort of people's lives. If your if the ideal or the optimum outcome of teaching is that you help someone to really engage with what they think they want to do and do it, then there is a great responsibility that comes with that.
Yes, it's true. I have now the last question. I would like to ask you, what is your opinion regarding at the non-profit space in the art system? Because you have the show in the basis, not non-profit space, but I don't ask you your position about this typology of the space.
Space. I think, well, base specifically is excellent. It was a great opportunity and experience for me to meet you all and to sort of work with you. I think you are doing a great job. In general, I really think these places are essential. They are, without them, if we only have profit spaces, or if we only have spaces which are controlled by political priorities or ideological kind of priorities of the kind that public institutions and galleries seem to be subject to, then we will lose enormous amount. I think the type of project like BASE is really something that it functions almost as a kind of a corrective in the art world. It is done, if you like, for the sake of art, because art is interesting and because it is interesting to artists. And at the same time, it is actually very welcoming to the kind of passerby, to the kind of incidental audience. I like those types of organizations very, very much. In fact, the other sort of comparable experience in recent years of the various shows I have done was in Flat Time House in London, which is the Flood Time House, is the former home of John Latham. Another sort of, even physically, slightly similar to the to BASE, another non-profit organization. And again, it really makes it somehow kind of, well, obviously, it somehow kind of creates a context for the project, or for the work, or for the discussion that the work may sort of generate. That is very, very important. That you will never get in a commercial space, for obvious reasons, because the commercial space is commercial, even though the project itself may, be produced with no intention to sell anything directly. Nor is it like the public spaces, which tend to be kind of really weighed down, both by the mission, as it were, of the institution, and at the same time by the expectations of the audience. I mean, it is interesting to think whether your audience has any particular kind of expectations when they walk into BASE. Do they take into account that they are in a place run by enthusiasts and volunteers for no profit, or do they just kind of, this is a sort of room and there are some artworks in it? Interesting. It is interesting how, as an audience, we should kind of, or if we should have this in mind. I mean, ideally, we should perhaps have it in mind when we walk into the space. What kind of space is it? But at the same time, the art should kind of chase away all those thoughts, and it shouldn't matter once we are in. That's the ideal.
Nice. Pavel, thank you for your time. Thank you for the kind word and very intelligent word. And thanks for your practice.
Okay. It's my pleasure, Lorenzo. And say hello to everybody there.
Of course.
All right.